Yo guys, today we are continuing my thoughts on the unpopular characters from the Danganronpa series, and this time we are covering Danganronpa 2. The hardest part about this was picking 5 people. There are clear favorites from this game. Nagito, Chiaki, Hajime, Fuyuhiko, Gundam, and Ibuki always seem to be favorites. However, the unpopular ones are a little more unclear to me, so it was hard choosing 5 for this, and I'm not very certain if the 5 I chose were really the most unpopular ones. So who did I choose? Well, today we're going to be looking at Teru, Mahiru, Hiyoko, Nakamura, and Akane. Again, I did have other characters in consideration. The Imposter, Mikan, Sonya, and Kazuichi were considered, but from my personal experience in the fandom, I saw them as a bit more popular than the 5 I picked. So first, we're gonna start with Teru. I think there's a bit of a misconception that Teru is one of my favorite characters in the series. That's not the case, but I do find aspects of his character to be very interesting. I like how he can't face the truth. He often lies to himself in order to avoid reality, and that's exactly what he does for the prologue and the first chapter. I also liked his motive for killing. He wanted to make sure his sick mother was okay, and if everyone lost their memories, he doesn't really know how much time has passed. I think he has one of the most realistic reactions to the memory loss situation, so I like him for that. I also like how he has this persona of being a classy chef. Even his pervertedness can be funny. My only problem with it is that there are several instances where he goes too far with it, such as his introduction scene with Sonya and at the end of his free time events. And don't get me started on Danganronpa 3, that scene is horrifying. What's funny is, if these scenes didn't exist, he actually would be a character I really liked and would definitely be in the middle, or maybe even reaching that higher portion of my list in the Danganronpa 2 cast. Unfortunately, because these scenes exist, he's one of my least favorite characters from the game. Now the next character is amazing. In my opinion, Mahiru is one of the people that makes the early chapters of Danganronpa 2 so great. Now yes, there's a debate on if she's unpopular or not. I even asked that question on my first video, but I took a look at Reddit and stuff. I just took a look everywhere, looked at polls, and I do think Mahiru is still one of the more unpopular ones. Now a lot of people will look at her free time events to find anything good about Mahiru, but for me that could be further from the truth. I think Mahiru is a much better character in the main game compared to the free time events. Her free time events are just her having a crush on Hajime, just like everyone else in the cast, and then the justification for why she expects more from the guys. Now let's talk about Mahiru in the main game. First of all, she works really well in the trials because she rushes to conclusions. She's quick to put the blame on someone, and a lot of times she thinks she's right when she isn't. This might seem like it's bad, but in my opinion, this makes the trials more fun. Having an aggressive character like this can add tension to the trial room, and interesting character interactions can come out of it. What adds to this is that she doesn't treat the male members of the cast as well as the female ones. This leads to moments where she's a hypocrite, but it's fun seeing this difference. For example, she yells at Kazuichi a lot for being incompetent, but if someone like Akane says something dumb, she'll let it go. I also think Fuyuhiko and Hiyoko are great examples. Early on, both of them are probably the meanest characters in their group, so it's really interesting to see the difference between how Mahiru treats Hiyoko and how she treats Fuyuhiko. The interactions between Mahiru and the two characters here are some of my favorite interactions in the game. Fuyuhiko and Mahiru are both hot-headed, so they're at each other's throats a lot, and I like seeing how Mahiru is unable to act like that when Hiyoko is bullying Mikan, for example. The moments before her merger with Fuyuhiko are also very interesting to me. She hid the fact that her friend committed a murder, and she believes that Fuyuhiko is wrong for judging her friend for that crime. In a sense, the reason why I like Mahiru is similar to why I like a character like Sayaka. Her actions are much morally gray, and things like her hypocrisy and aggressiveness make the interactions between the characters more dramatic and entertaining. To top it all off, she did all of this in 2 chapters. So yeah, really good character, one of my favorites from this game. Now next is Hiyoko, and I replayed Danganronpa 2 a while ago, maybe a few months ago, And Hiyoko rose up a lot in my favorites. In fact, my favorite Danganronpa 2 character is either her or Hiyoko. Now you might be thinking that's weird. How is this foul-mouthed character one of my favorites? Well, it's because she's so much different from the cast she's in. Most of the characters in DR2 are very friendly with each other, so Hiyoko stands out. First, I like how she calls people out. She's kind of similar to Celeste in this way, where she will make an unexpected attack on someone. For example, she calls out Akane for being the person who quote-unquote killed Nakamura. While everyone's crying about Nakamura's death, Hiyoko's saying what needs to be said, and gets to the root of the problem with how Akane was too rash and Nakamura got himself killed because of his feelings of friendship. This is refreshing because when everyone's being friendly in a killing game of all things, we got Hiyoko who actually spits out facts and tells everyone what needs to be said. For example, Fuyuko's return in chapter 3. And okay, he got sliced in the eye, which does suck, right? But this is the thing. This man was trying to kill Mahiru. Sure, he decided he would sacrifice Peko to keep everyone else alive, but who knows what he'll do next? The guy has anger issues and is a Yakuza leader, but everyone is okay with him joining the group, and no one questions the consequences of him being here, nor do they express any anger at him trying to kill Mahiru. You know, no one but Hiyoko. Now sure, Hiyoko has more of a reason to do so because Mahiru was her best friend, but either way, it makes sense for her to call out Fuyuhiko for his actions. And imagine that happening. Imagine your best friend dies, and then everyone else is just crying for the person who tried to kill your best friend. I don't know, but after that, I think her reactions make a lot of sense. I also like how her development is very slow. It makes it feel a lot more realistic. Like she shows hints of changing when she goes to Fuyuhiko's recovery party, but once the despair disease starts acting up, she reverts back to her normal self and only cares about her own safety. I like this because when a character changes, it would be weird if they just always get better. You can't get better that easily, and Hiyoko's character shows that you can experience pitfalls where you revert back to your normal self. Now, yeah, she does die before her arc is completed, but I think her character work before her death was done very well nonetheless. I also like the contrast between Hiyoko and Fuyuhiko. Hiyoko attempts to become more independent as the game goes on, while Fuyuhiko tries to depend more on others. So yeah, really good character, one of my personal favorites. Next up, we got Nakamura Nidai, and he's a unique character in the series because he literally disappears for a short period of the game before returning again, and I think he's the only character to do so. For me, Nakamura's best moments are actually in chapter 2. I love his reactions to Peko in the second trial when she becomes Sparkling Justice, because that was literally my reaction to it as well. He was the most visibly confused in the whole trial, and I love moments such as the one in the end where he just tells everyone to end the trial, because like, dude, that trial was insane. I mean, he wasn't wrong, that trial needed to end. He's also pretty funny in the beginning of the game, where he's much more carefree than everyone else, and laughs at them during embarrassing moments. Nakamura is generally relaxed. Even though he's in a killing game, he's always really happy, and he's enjoying his time on the island. However, that's not to say he can't be scared of the situation that he's in. In chapter 2, Nakamura is one of the 2 people that plan to type Nagito to eliminate a threat. He's visibly scared, and can't lie if his life depended on it, which is a good angle for a character who is otherwise carefree. He feels like he could be a character in a popular shonen anime. He's able to sense people's motivations, he has an indestructible fighting spirit, and is even able to smile when he's dying. This is only emphasized further with his free time events, where we learn he's actually gonna die soon, but despite that, he can move forward and live happily. Now I think what holds Nakamura back for me is that I only find him entertaining during specific moments. He doesn't have any long-lasting appeal to me. I found his poop jokes funny in the beginning, but they lost comedic value for me pretty fast. His jokes are generally just loud slapstick humor, which just isn't that entertaining to me. Now he does have a good sacrifice scene in chapter 3, but after that he disappears for a very long time. He comes back in chapter 4 as Mekamaru, but I don't enjoy him as a robot too much. A lot of his dialogue is just him establishing his robot functions, so we know what's gonna come for the chapter 4 murder, So I feel like his character just doesn't get a chance to shine here. The 4th chapter didn't really make him feel like a character to me, and as a result, Nakamura feels like someone who died in chapter 2 when he really died in chapter 4. Overall, I just think he needed more screen time to interact with multiple members of the cast. He's one of my least favorites from the cast, but by no means bad. Now this last one was the hardest to pick. After thinking about it for a while, I was actually pretty convinced with my first 4 picks. But who's the 5th most unpopular character? Is it the ultimate imposter, Mikan, Akane, Kazuichi, or Sonya? And this was tough, but I think Mikan, Kazuichi, and Sonya are actually considerably more popular than the other 2, and I went with my gut, and in the end I picked Akane. Akane is a unique character. In the first trial, she doesn't even know what the trial is, or what the stakes are. My favorite part about Akane is her recklessness. She rushes when she makes decisions, and it leads to many negative consequences. For example, her attacks on Monokuma. Again, she often doesn't realize how dangerous the situation is. Well, maybe that's not the right way of putting it. By this point, she does understand the danger of the killing game, but takes dumb risks anyways, which is fun to see. Another example of this is her attack on Nagito in chapter 5, which is just fun to see. It's after this moment where she makes no attacks and tries her best to actually do detective work, and even though she doesn't help, she does try, which is what counts. I also like the speed of her character growth. Again, I said the same thing with Hiyoko, but I appreciate these characters that have depth added to them at a slow speed, because the killing game doesn't last that long, so these characters are changing on a day-by-day basis in a very grim situation. It makes sense why characters that are more stubborn, like Akane, don't go through drastic changes, because they don't have enough time to do so just based on the time span of the game. For example, let's take Akane and Fuyuhiko's conversation in chapter 4. Akane's rash actions lead to Nakamura almost getting killed in chapter 3. Fuyuhiko makes a speech about how she can't take Nakamura's death for granted, but it doesn't really look like she's taking in what Fuyuhiko's trying to tell her. My interpretation of the scene is that she does understand what he is saying, and probably even believes that what he's saying is correct, but is too stubborn to accept her mistake, and she doesn't want to show weakness. Of course she does during the end of chapter 4, but by the end, she's able to do what Nakamura does best, and stay happy despite the grim situation. Now if anything, my biggest problem with Akane is actually not the character herself, it's the situation around her. The game goes through some of the most contrived events to make her character arc work. When Nakamura sacrifices himself for Akane in chapter 3, it doesn't change the fact that Akane broke the rules. Therefore, Monokuma has every right to execute her. Despite that, she still lives to continue her character arc. Now you could argue, Monokuma thought Nakamura's body destruction was enough compensation for this, but then you have the problem of this happening again. Akane attacks Monokuma for a second time, and Nakamura protects her without suffering any damage, but Akane doesn't get executed. What makes this more hard to believe is that we're in the game where Monokuma's goal is to literally kill as many students as possible, as quickly as possible. By the time we get to chapter 6, Monokuma gets beaten by the shutdown sequence, where at least half the starting number of students are needed. Akane is one of those students used, but Monokuma should have the option to kill her before the shutdown sequence activates. Despite this, I still think her character work is really good, and she's still consistently good even if you don't look at her character arc. So there we go, that's 5 more characters down. If there's one character I definitely think could have made it here, it was the ultimate imposter, but I don't see a lot of hate for that character, and I do see a lot more hate for the 5 characters I picked, so yeah. Next time, we'll end this mini-series with Danganronpa V3. So, see you guys then.